Good morning. Today is Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. This week's Torah portion, the Parsha of Acharei Mos, lists a number of prohibited marriage relationships, sexual relationships, relationships between relatives that are considered immoral, close to things that we should not be doing, certain close relatives, certain marriages that we're not supposed to enter into. Now, we have names for certain relationships, and the names that we have for the relationship often indicate the nature of that relationship. Just to use an English example. So we have a relationship called a brother-in-law. What does it mean, a brother-in-law? It means a brother who becomes my brother through law. Meaning, if my wife has a brother, so he is my brother-in-law, through law of the marriage of my wife and myself, he becomes my brother. So it expresses something about the relationship. During the time of the Torah, it was permissible for a man to have more than one wife. It was never an easy thing. And in fact, I've shared with you before, every single time that the Torah gives us an example of a man with more than one wife, we find and we see the difficulties involved in it. And the name of that relationship indicates the difficulty. If one man is married to two wives, so what is the relationship of wife one to wife two? What do they call each other? They're not cousins, they're not niece and nephew. What are they called? So the Talmud has a name. They're called a Tzarah. Tzarah. Which means, the word means, a Tzarah means a difficulty. But that's the name. If Rachel and Leah are married to Yaakov, so Rachel is Leah's Tzarah. Because it's not an easy relationship. You're fighting for affection. As we see in the Torah, there's jealousy, there's controversy, and that's the name. That's just the name of the relationship. So the Torah gives us a long list of prohibited relationships, intimate relationships. And then the Torah tells us as follows. V'isha el achosa lo sikach. A man is not allowed to marry one woman and then later her sister. A man is not allowed to marry two sisters. Litzrar, because it will cause controversy. Legalos ervas aleh, which would be an act of immorality b'chayeha, during her lifetime. Now, this prohibited relationship, that a man is not allowed to marry two sisters, is unique from all of the other prohibited relationships in two ways. There are two features that are unique. Number one, the Torah gives us the reason for this prohibition. Litzrar, because it will cause jealousy. I mean, even two wives that are not related to each other, the jealousy and the competition is going to be enormous. But if it was two sisters vying for the attention of one man, it could be disastrous. So this is the only relationship where the Torah tells us the reason for it, and this is the only relationship that is prohibited that is conditional. B'chayeha. The prohibition of marrying one sister only applies to marry the second sister as long as the first sister is alive. Let's say a man is married to Rachel, and then they get divorced. He's not allowed to marry Leah, her sister, as long as Rachel is alive. But once Rachel passes away, then he's allowed to marry her, the sister. That doesn't apply to any other relationship. The Torah says a man is not allowed to marry a woman and her daughter, or a woman and her mother. So that's prohibited. And the Torah doesn't tell us why. It's prohibited. It's immoral. And it doesn't matter if a man marries a woman and she passes away. She's no longer alive. He is still not allowed to marry her daughter or her mother. It doesn't matter if the other one is still alive or not. It's prohibited for all time. Why is this one different? So the Ramban Nachmanides explains that this prohibition of a man marrying two sisters is in a completely separate category from all the other prohibitions. All of the other prohibitions relate to some aspect of immorality. It may be obvious to us, it may not be so obvious to us, but it relates to some aspect of immorality. And therefore, the Torah doesn't give us a specific reason. It's wrong. However, in the case of a man marrying two sisters, the reason is because it will cause enmity between these two sisters. Two siblings are supposed to get along with each other. They're supposed to love each other. But if it's allowed that a man could marry both of them, it could lead the two of them, the siblings, to no longer be close to each other. In fact, to become tsaros of each other, enemies of each other. And so therefore, for this reason, in order not to allow a loving relationship between siblings to become a hostile relationship, the Torah prohibits it. But of course, that only applies when one of them is still alive. Once one of the sisters has died, then that type of competition or that type of enmity is no longer applicable. So therefore, it's the only relationship which is conditional. It only applies when they're both alive. Rabbi Yisachar Frand derives from this mitzvah two very important ideas. The first is, we see from the Torah that causing two sisters to hate each other is something that is so serious, it's on the same level as adultery. The fact that the Torah puts this prohibition in the passage relating to all of the other aspects of adultery and other prohibited relationships means it's not just a social problem. That social problem of causing enmity between two siblings is as serious a sin as actual adultery itself. That's number one. And number two, we see from this mitzvah, this prohibition, how important it is in God's eyes for children to get along with each other, for siblings to get along with each other, and not to be in competition, and not to be arguing, and not to be at tzarah one to the other. The Torah does not want siblings to fight. We saw this over and over again in the narratives in Bereshis, where unfortunately all too often it did happen. And we saw the terrible results that come from it. And the Torah is telling us, both in terms of narrative in the book of Bereshis and here in terms of law, look how serious it is to prevent siblings from coming to argue with each other. And therefore, it's a very important lesson for us. If we are siblings, or if we have children who are siblings, we must go out of our way to prevent any kind of enmity and to make sure that those relationships become loving. And that's a very big challenge because things happen all the time and arguments come up and there are reasons that one doesn't talk to another. The Torah is telling us we have to try. We have to try. As parents, of course, not to show any favoritism. That's what we learned from Bereshis, is often the cause of sibling rivalry. But if we're siblings ourselves, we have to be willing to overcome. We have to be willing to forgive, sometimes willing to forget, because the Torah places the importance of siblings being loving to each other and not being a tzarah one to the other at the highest level of its priority. So we can't give up. And if there is an argument, we have to be able to figure out a way to solve it, or to overcome it, or at least to be able to live in a way that is still close, notwithstanding the disagreement. For siblings to get along is as important as the most serious laws of the Torah, and we learn that from this week's Torah portion. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.